Okay, so welcome back. Today we're actually going to do a different attempt of critical reading. Rather than reading the entire chapter, which I think after reviewing, it's a bit too dry, too hard to digest. I've decided to go with a different approach. And this type, it will be just highlighting essential passages that I think is particularly great and doesn't need a lot of context to understand, or at least I will try my best to actually explain and discuss. This new format, I am hoping these videos will be around 10-15 minutes, and over time, an accumulation of these shorter videos, we can then create those larger playlists that have themes that orient around these across a variety of books. Okay, so today we're actually going to try going with Closing of the American Mind again. If you can see over here, that is again the same book, right? And we're going to go straight into a clean slate, page 59, because I thought these two pages are especially interesting considering our current situation. So let's start from over here. Inevitably, the impression that our general populace is better educated depends on an ambiguity in the meaning of the word education, or a fudging of the distinction between liberal and technical education. A highly trained computer specialist need not have had any more learning about morals, politics, or religion than the most ignorant of persons. All to the contrary, his narrow education, with the prejudices and pride accompanying it, and its literature which comes to be and passes away in a day and uncritically accepts that premise of current wisdom, can cut him off from the liberal learning that simpler folks used to absorb from a variety of traditional sources. It is not evident to me that someone whose regular reading consists of Time, Playboy, and Scientific American has any profounder wisdom about the world than the rural schoolboy of yore with his McGuffey reader. When a youngster like Lincoln sought to educate himself, the immediate available obvious things for him to learn were the Bible, Shakespeare, and Euclid. Was he really worse off than those who try to find their way through the technical smorgasbord of the current school system, with its utter inability to distinguish between important and unimportant in any way other than by the demands of the market? My grandparents were ignorant people by our standards, and my grandfather held only lowly jobs. But their home was spiritually rich because all the things done in it, not only the way, what was specifically ritual, found their origin in Bible's commandments, and their explanation in the Bible stories, and the commentaries on them, and had their imaginative counterparts in the deeds of the myriad of exemplary heroes. My grandparents found reason for the existence of their family and the fulfillment of their duties in serious writing, and they interpreted their special sufferings with respect to a great and ennobling past. Their simple faith and practices linked them to a great scholar and thinkers who dealt with the same material, not from outside or from an alien perspective, but believing as they did, while simply going deeper and providing guidance. There was a respect for real learning, because it had a felt connection with their lives. This is what a community and a history mean, a common experience dividing high and low into a single body of belief. I do not believe that my generation, my cousins who have been educated in the American way, all of whom are MDs or PhDs, have any comparable learning. When they talk about heaven and earth, the relations between men and women, parents and children, the human condition, I hear nothing but cliches, superficialities, the material of satire. I am not saying that anything so trite as that life is fuller when people have myths to live by. I mean, rather, that a life based on the book is closer to the truth, that it provides the material for deeper research in the access to the real nature of things. Without the great revelations, epics, and philosophies as part of our natural vision, there is nothing to see out there, and eventually little left inside. The Bible is not the only means to furnish a mind, but without a book of similar gravity, read with the gravity of the potential believer, it will remain unfurnished. Okay, so these are the 2 pages that I really want to spend some time talking about today, because I find that it is an excellent commentary on the current education system that we're experiencing and the problems that we are noticing with the orientations of what is valuable and what is good as considered by our contemporary society. Right? So he says that, right? The impressions that our general populace is better educated depends on an ambiguity in the meaning of the word education, or a fudging of the distinction between liberal and technical education. I think that's a fantastic point, right? What is considered a good education? In our times today, good education is often considered as an education that will earn a lot of money, right? What are the great majors that you can take at the university? Typically, it's considered like pre-med, law, computer science, business, right? So you can go into finance or investment. These are the degrees, right? The STEM majors that are considered as good nowadays. This is what is better educated. Those that are individuals with PhDs, with masters and MBAs, right? But he says clearly that the impression that our general populace is better educated depends on an ambiguity in the meaning of the word education. An ambiguity that we have to fudge the distinction between liberal and technical education. Once he introduces this idea of technical education, it becomes really clear, like, okay, technical education is clearly the education that teaches you how to do something as a major, right? Teaches you a skill that you can then use to apply for a job. A good litmus test for this kind of education, technical education, is, are you immediately employable? If your major is something that will allow you to be employed very quickly, do you see a pipeline that takes you from your college, from your university, from your major to a work? If it is very clear, then it's probably a technical education. So if that's technical education, what is liberal education? Well, it's the liberal arts, right? Humanities, English, rhetoric, philosophy, anthropology, sociology. These are majors that are typically considered as liberal, or the majors that are a lot less employable, but it answers or strives to try to answer the bigger questions in life. The questions like, who am I, right? Or what does it mean to be a person? These are big questions that are very hard to turn into profit, right? And hence not a kind of technical education. Okay, so it goes on to say, a highly trained computer specialist need not have had any more learning about morals, politics, or religion than that most ignorant of persons. All to the contrary, his narrow education with the prejudices and the pride accompanying it, and its literature which comes to be and passes away in a day and uncritically accepts the premise of current wisdom, can cut him off from the liberal learning that simpler folk used to absorb from a variety of traditional sources. So the highly trained computer specialists, who are these people? These are the people that you find at Apple, that you find at Facebook, that you find at Microsoft, right? They are the highly trained computer specialists, the engineers, the people that live in San Francisco, that you find in Silicon Valley. He's saying that you don't need any more learning about morals, politics, or religion than the most ignorant of persons. And it's true, right? The university education that they get, they probably have a general education course on civic duty or on government, but that's only one course out of 8 semesters or 4 years at the university. They're not asked to know the things about morals, right? They're not asked to know about politics and religion. And a lot of times we say, well, sure, because that's not his job. His job is to know how to design programs, right? Write computer programs that work. But the bigger issue is, well, if you don't have a sense of ethics, right, a sense of morals, what happens is then you can start designing apps or websites or, for example, Facebook, these infinite scrolling designs that are designed to make you addicted to social media. It's specifically a kind of hack into the human brain. It rewards your dopamine system in a way that gets you stuck on the phone, that makes you addicted to the phone. So whether or not it is good for the human being is less of a concern than whether or not it is profitable, whether or not it is effective, right? Whether or not the design gets the job done, right? It doesn't think about the implications. The important thing that he's trying to argue here is that liberal education teaches us about the morals, right? The implications of whether or not this thing is right or wrong. So it is not evident to me that someone whose regular reading consists of Time, Playboy, and Scientific American has any profounder wisdom about the world than the rural schoolboy of yore with his McGuffey reader, right? He talks about how these people with its literature comes to be passed and passes away in a day and uncritically accepts the premises of current wisdom. How new things become the new fad and we just take it on as our new Bible, right? There is no consistency or continuity in terms of what is truly, what is it that we truly believe in. For example, we don't even have a choice of whether or not we would like to stick to the old iOS system. It just gets updated to you. Right? We barely have any choice with whether or not we get to stick with the old Facebook. It just gets updated. And you can choose to, well, keep the old Facebook for a while until it gets entirely phased out. We don't get a choice in these kind of things, right? And he says, so we have the prejudices and pride accompanying it, and it's literature which comes to be passed away in a day and uncritically accepts the premise of current wisdom, can cut him off from the liberal learning that simpler folks used to absorb from a variety of traditional sources, right? Without these traditional sources of, for example, the Bible, right? For example, family values, we accept what is new. We accept what is more efficient, right? And we don't consider whether or not new is necessarily better, and better in the sense of, well, does it give us more meaning? Are we doing the right thing, or are we just better and faster at doing the things that take us in the wrong direction? These are things that aren't really questioned, or people tend to back away from these moral issues, right? If you look at how Zuckerberg responded at Congress when he was being questioned. You know, these moral questions, he doesn't want to touch it. And a lot of times these computer engineers, these people in tech, are very squirmy when it comes to moral issues, because it's not a space that we tend to mix together, right? So he goes on to say, when a youngster like Lincoln sought to educate himself, the immediately available obvious things for him to learn were the Bible, Shakespeare, and Euclid. Was he really worse off than those who try to find their way through the technical smorgasbord of the current school system with its utter inability to distinguish between important and unimportant in any other way than by the demands of the market? This is very big, right? Our current education system tend to determine what is important and unimportant according to the market. That's like a lot of schools now, a lot of lower schools, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. They are teaching students how to write computer science programs, right? How to write programs. How do you become a programmer? It's because, well, if you can write a program, you become much more competitive on the market. But what if you never end up writing programs? What if it's just not your thing, right? What if you prefer reading literature? These things are getting phased out more because our value system is more oriented towards whether or not this is hot on the market, whether or not this is demanded, right? Parents feel like, well, we got to educate our kids, every individual parent, right? We got to educate our kids about computer science so they can be competitive in the world in the future. They're all good intentions, right? They are all good intentions, but the result is not necessarily the best for us as a society. So it goes on to say, my grandparents were ignorant people by our standard. My grandfather held only lowly jobs. But their home was spiritually rich, because all the things done in it, not only what was specifically ritual, found their origin in the Bible's commandment, and their explanation in the Bible's stories, and the commentaries on them, and had their imaginative counterparts in the deeds of the myriad of exemplary heroes. My grandparents found reasons for the existence of their family and the fulfillment of their duties in serious writing, and they interpreted their special sufferings with respect to a great and ennobling past. In other words, right, through these big books like the Bible, people of the older generation, his grandparents, Allan Bloom's grandparents, had a sense of meaning, had a sense of their location in the grander picture of things, right? They felt a connection with the past, and they understood their responsibilities and respected their obligations. Their simple faith and practices linked them to great scholars and thinkers who dealt with the same material, not from outside or from an alien perspective, but believing as they did, while simply going deeper and providing guidance. There was a respect for real learning because it had a felt connection with their lives. This is what a community and a history mean, a common experience inviting high and low into a single body of belief. Whether you are upper class or lower class, whether you are a laborer or a person in the higher class where you don't need to labor, right? Whether you're a bourgeois or proletariat. The fact is, right, having a traditional background where artists, laborers, workers, scientists, everybody alike, they had a felt connection, a shared connection with their lives. This is what a community and a history mean, a common experience inviting high and low into a single body of belief. Sharing a single body of belief means we can have at least a mutual understanding to discuss problems. Right? Finally, I do not believe that my generation, my cousins who have been educated in the American way, all of whom are MDs or PhDs, have any comparable learning. This is a huge, huge claim, right? He says that, well, my grandparents are ignorant people by our standards. They held lowly jobs. They were probably farmers. They didn't have any degrees. They didn't go to university. But they understood their education. They understood what real learning was, and they were connected with deeper history. There was depth in their character and lives. And that they are spiritually rich because all the things done in it, not only what was specifically ritual, right? They followed these things because it was part of a greater movement. So he says, I do not believe that my cousins in my same generation, those with the MDs and PhDs, have any comparable learning. When they talk about heaven and earth, the relationship between men and women, parents and children, the human condition, I hear nothing but cliches, superficialities, the material satire. I'm not saying anything so trite as that life is fuller when people have myths to live by. He's not saying that if we can delude ourselves or have a belief in certain myth, that life is better. What he is saying is that rather that a life based on the book is closer to the truth, that it provides material for deeper research in and access to the real nature of things. Real nature as in what is the greater meaning of life, right? Of what is the truth, capital T, truth. And that he believes that life based on the book, as in the Bible, is much closer to these questions, right? It has a better ability to answer the questions of what is right or wrong, what is evil, what is the proper conduct when you are in trouble, right? How do you face anger? How do you diffuse jealousy? These are questions that does not get answered in textbooks about how do you code, right? About how to write Python. Without the great revelations, epics, and philosophies as part of our natural vision, there is nothing to see out there, and eventually little left inside. Right? This is really important. He's saying that if we don't have these stories with us, these philosophies, not just part of the Bible, but our fairy tales, our childhood stories like Alice in Wonderland, without these great revelations, epics, and philosophies as part of our natural vision, there is nothing to see out there. right? We don't see the associations of these bigger meanings in life, these single body of belief or these connections. We don't see that anymore when we walk around. When we hang out, when we interact with people, when we interact with our parents, with our friends, we don't recognize this connection with the past. Oh, like this is a problem that I saw in the story. This is a dilemma that the same character faced. We don't recognize that anymore. And the issue is that when there is nothing to see out there, eventually there will be little left inside. We start to lose interest in the world, right? There's no more curiosity. And we all know that when you start to lose a sense of curiosity to the world, you start to die inside, right? The best way to grow is to stay curious, is to go out there and look for things to learn. So he says, the Bible is not the only means to furnish a mind, but without a book of similar gravity, read with the gravity of the potential believer, it will remain unfurnished. To furnish a mind, right? Imagine a mind or your head or your brain like a house. It's a big house. You can fill a lot of things in your house. But without a big book like the Bible, or for example, 道德经, or the Bhagavad Gita, these books that have such gravity and importance, or the classics like the Odyssey or Plato's Dialogue, read with the gravity of the potential believer, it will remain unfurnished, right? If you don't read it with the same kind of eyes and treat it with the same kind of importance, even books like Walden Pond, these American classics. Why are they classics? Because they share a certain value that is true in any time, in every generation. You just got to spend the time to look at it. But nowadays, schools don't even teach these books, right? That if we don't read them with the gravity of the potential believer, as in the feeling or in the belief that we will actually learn and gain something, right? A lot of times we read the Bible as in, with the perspective of doubt. We don't think of it as a book of wisdom or a source of knowledge anymore. We think of it as, in its context, it was just made up fairy tale. So therefore, there's nothing to learn about or nothing to learn from. That it will remain unfurnished. The brain, your mind, will remain an empty house, a house that is really big but has no furniture, right? And a lot of times you see that with folks who know a whole lot about nothing, right? They have all these facts in their head, but when they are confronted with real problems, like for example, going through a breakup, they don't know how to handle themselves. Or when they are met with the dilemma of whether or not they should go on to another job, or whether or not they should reject a person, it becomes an incredibly difficult decision because their mind is unfurnished, that they don't know how to evaluate right or wrong, right? When they see an action that is clearly wrong, that someone is doing something that they shouldn't do, how do you step in and say no? How do you go and diffuse the situation? Or how do you prevent this thing from getting even worse? These are things that oftentimes you will find answers in the Bible if you can read them closely, right? So, I think that will be the end of today's video. I think that's around 25 minutes. And the point of something like this is hopefully in the future we can continue to put out more and more videos of this sort where I will just highlight particular passages from books that I find really interesting. And over time, we will have a playlist or multiple playlists of different themes based on these different sections. I hope you like it. And if you are still watching, thank you for watching. And I'll see you next time.